Our next distinguished alumnus is Judge Duncan D. Wheale. I've asked DeKalb State Court Judge Alvin T. Wong to introduce his law school classmate. A few years ago, when Judge Wong was the distinguished alumnus recipient, their roles were reversed and Judge Wheale introduced him, so I think turnabout is fair play. Judge Wong?
Thank you, Dean. Good afternoon, everybody. It is my pleasure today to introduce to you the 2014 Distinguished Alumnus of the Year for Atlanta's John Marshall Law School, the Honorable Duncan D. Wheale. I met Duncan the first night of classes back in the mid-1970s when we were both freshmen. I think you call them 1Ls now at John Marshall. Back then, the school was housed in an aging two-story red brick building looming right off the edge of Interstate 85 at Cortlandt Street, right down where we came in this morning. Most of the students worked during the day and attended classes at night, and that is the genesis of this school's long-standing reputation of giving students the practical training necessary to function in the real world. Anyway, I came into class. I sat behind this police officer, in my bell-bottom blue jeans, hair down appropriately to my shoulder. Yes, at one time I did have hair. I crossed my leg. I kicked the gun holster of this police officer that was sitting in front of me. He turned and scowled. I apologized, and we've been friends since. As lawyers and judges, we have been taught that we need to be ethical, honest, compassionate, and zealous in the pursuit of justice. Duncan Wheale is all of those things. After graduating from law school, he and his wife, Carolyn, sit right there, moved to Augusta. He entered into private practice, first at one of the city's old-line defense firms, then with a successful plaintiff's firm where he eventually became a partner. In 1996, on behalf of a church and neighboring inner-city property owners, he filed suit against the Atlanta Gaslight Company for not cleaning up hazardous chemicals buried in a long-defunct utility plant. The chemical had seeped into groundwater, and despite reports that coal tar had been spotted bubbling out of the grass, the company had done nothing for over 11 years, citing that they were still conducting environmental studies on how best to remove the waste. The contamination affected a 9-block area of the poorest part of downtown Augusta, causing people to get sick and damaging properties. Within 45 days of filing the lawsuit, Duncan had already spent more than $300,000 to advance his client's cause. The case eventually settled for $20 million, and the company agreed to do the necessary cleanup. In 1998, Duncan Wheale ran a successful campaign and was elected to the Superior Court bench in Richmond County. He was known as a tough but compassionate judge, and he was especially passionate about protecting children. When 4 child abuse cases, all involving serious injuries, came before him in a 4-week period, he demanded to know why the children might have fallen through the cracks. He was told he did not have any authority or ability to hold defects accountable. The judge's response was to convene a special hearing and hold the defects manager in contempt of court, a move which shook up the entire Augusta defects system and led, at the judge's direction, to the formation of a community task force to address the problem. Duncan Wheale had the courage to challenge the Augusta court system over practices that were wasting time and money and impeding those who sought justice. When he first took the bench, criminal cases in Richmond County Superior Court, except for death penalty cases, were not assigned to a particular judge. This led to tremendous inefficiency and redundancy. Cases languished. Some even got dismissed when witnesses could not be located due to long periods of inactivity. Frustrations were high, and justice was spotty at best. Wheale says judges who asked questions were sometimes told they might have opposition in the next election. In 2005, after an investigative report published by the local newspaper put a spotlight on the lack of case management and resulting issues, Judge Wheale wrote a letter to the Georgia Supreme Court describing the confusion, inefficiency, and the judge shopping that was taking place. Within 2 weeks, the Supreme Court granted Judge Wheale's request that local judges be made to follow the state guidelines regarding case assignments. That totally changed the Augusta criminal justice system. But he paid a heavy price. There were threats, both professional and personal, and he found himself the subject of a criminal investigation by a special prosecutor. He fought against all that and prevailed, and his efforts were ultimately rewarded by the Augusta Chronicle, who selected Judge Wheale as one of the top 10 leaders of the decade in December of 2010. After 10 years of service, Judge Wheale decided to retire from the bench and move to Charleston, South Carolina. There, he returned to his alma mater, the Citadel, to mentor students and serve as an advisor to the president, refusing to accept a salary for doing so. The other day when I called, he was in his mountain home, busy restoring a World War II Army Jeep. I hate him. We can all learn a valuable lesson from Judge Wheale's actions. My hope for each of you on this momentous day is that you will have the internal fortitude to act righteously with conviction and courage, as Judge Wheale has done all of his life. And I also hope that you will be fortunate enough to have a friend like Duncan Wheale during your lifetime. May I present to you Judge Duncan Wheale.
Thank you, Al. I'm going to speak to the students for a moment, if I may. 38 years ago, he and I sat in this room taking the bar exam. We left after the second day, went to a local bar, and after about 10 beers, were commiserating whether or not we'd ever be lawyers. Never in our wildest dream did we ever imagine that we would both be judges sitting on a stage in the same room. And I thank you for your friendship, Al, for all these years. I want to thank my wife, who encouraged me 40 years ago to go to the law school, and every semester thereafter to stay in law school. And after graduating, has been my closest counsel throughout my practice and my life. I thank my son, Patrick, who's here today. He and his wife are now lawyers. Patrick has grown up from a young baby to a young man who is now also one of my best friends. When Al called me 2 weeks ago and asked about this award and wanted to talk about it, he asked me which award meant the most to me in my lifetime. And I was in my garage in the mountains. I said, ironically, Al, I have 3 boxes, banker boxes here in the garage stacked up with awards and plaques I've received over the years. There's only one award that I have kept on my shelf, and that's the Martin Luther King Lifetime Achievement Award. And that award arose out of the case that Al was talking about with the church. There are a number of ironies today. When I was in law school at John Marshall 40 years ago, I clerked for a man by the name of Edgar Neely, who was one of the top trial lawyers in the state of Georgia. He told me on a weekly basis, when you practice law, when you start out into the world, Do the right thing, follow your heart, and good things will follow. Don't worry about the money. Good things will follow. It's ironic that when Edgar Neely, my mentor, died, Richard Herzog, who is the chairman of the board for John Marshall, now occupies his office, and that's in the law firm. Now, all those other awards are in these 3 boxes in my garage, but the Martin Luther King Award stays on my shelf, and this award I'm going to equate to that one. It's the highest honor I could have ever imagined receiving. I followed Edgar Neely's advice to follow your heart, to try to do the right thing, and good things will follow. When this black preacher came into my office and said, "Will you represent our church? Other lawyers won't help us. We can't pay you, but we need help." I learned something by representing him and his bishop, Bishop Othel Lakey, that I never knew. When I was a student at John Marshall, exactly 60 years ago today, the U.S. Supreme Court rendered the most important decision in my lifetime, Brown versus Board of Education. 60 years ago today, May 17, 1954. 20 years after that, Al Wong and I were in law school studying that case. The lawyer for the blacks who were plaintiffs was a lawyer by the name of Thurgood Marshall, who was ultimately appointed as a U.S. Supreme Court justice because of that case. He's just handling that case. His fame and notoriety arose from that. But what we weren't taught is that the man who was the brains behind this case was a man by the name of Channing Tobias. Channing Tobias was a black man who was chairman of the NAACP nationwide. He hired Thurgood Marshall to represent these black plaintiffs in this case. Channing Tobias grew up in this little black church in Augusta, Georgia, that I was now representing. I heard many stories about him from Bishop Othel Lakey that dealt with the Brown versus Board of Education case, but who would have ever dreamed when I was sitting in John Marshall studying Brown versus Board of Education that I would be representing the church where the mastermind of that case grew up. I'm telling you this story because you have no idea where this diploma is going to take you in your lifetimes. If you'll follow that advice Edgar Neely gave me, to follow your heart, help people in need, and good things will follow. They will. As a result of handling that case for that poor black church, Coretta Scott King approved me getting that award 10 days before she died. Now, I find it ironic that Judge Wong and I did not attend our graduation at John Marshall, but we're here for yours. This is the first graduation of John Marshall that my wife has ever attended. And there's a reason. Today, I was supposed to be in Denver, Colorado with my other son. I received an email from Dean Lynn a month ago telling me about this award, and we changed our plans. And I did it for one reason. When we went to John Marshall, it was a struggling school, and everyone was predicting it was going to go out of business. And the school had been in existence since 1933, never been accredited. And 10 years ago, your dean, Richardson Lynn, was dean of a very prestigious school, Pepperdine University Law School on the West Coast, California. He was recruited to come here and be your dean. The school then was 70 years in existence and had never been accredited. Why he accepted this position is beyond, I've never understood. But he did. He came, and shortly after he arrived, with his leadership and his national reputation, he took the school to accreditation, national accreditation, and he has taken it much farther since. Today is his last day as dean. I'm here because of him. And for many years, I would never tell people where I went to law school. Today, I'm going to put this award next to the Martin Luther King Lifetime Achievement Award. And I'm as proud of it as I am that. And it's because of him and what he's done. All of you graduates, all of you parents and friends owe a tremendous debt to him because you have something now that you can be proud of. And I'm going to ask you in my closing remarks, because I'll never get to speak to a group like this again, the last thing I want you to hear me say is, would you please stand with me and give him a round of applause? Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Wheale, and thanks to all of you as well.